So this story popped up on my feed last night, and I kind of want to talk about this. It's a really tough subject, I guess. But Jason Whitlock, formerly at Fox Sports, now at Outkick, Clay Travis's empire, he had this article about female sports, and analysts and reporters and whatever, and he kind of flamed a few of them. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the article and a little bit about kind of how I see this, how it should be broken down. So first, here's the backstory. Maria Taylor for ESPN messed up her NBA awards ballot. She left Anthony Davis out of the first team, second team, and third team. And she explained that it's a simple oversight. Now, that's a tough scene, right? Like, if you have an NBA awards ballot and you leave off a player that probably could have been the MVP, and it's just an oversight, you can't make those oversights, right? Like, you can't leave Patrick Mahomes off of the first team NFL list because you forgot. Bad look. So Doug Gottlieb asked why she had a vote in the first place. Maria Taylor responds, because I played basketball, I cover the league, and I deserve everything I've worked for. The last sentence probably is irrelevant. I think he is making a question. I mean, why does she have a vote? She's a student, she's a host, sideline reporter. I don't know if she should have a vote, is what Doug Gottlieb's saying. Playing basketball and covering the league, I also don't think qualifies. Like, that's not like a qualifier. I mean, there's a ton of people who have played basketball who don't have a vote. There's a ton of people who cover the league and don't have a vote. So, like, those two combined, I don't know if that is good enough reason. And the last part, I keep clicking the thing. And the last part, I deserve everything I've worked for. I don't think he's saying you have, right? So let's keep going. So then they announced, they go through the question a little bit, whatever. So then let's go to Jason Whitlock's story. So Whitlock writes this big story on female reporters and misogyny and all sorts of stuff. Now here's a couple of quips. Maria Taylor is tall, attractive, and quite personable on television. Her career as a collegiate volleyball and basketball player at Georgia adds to her credibility as a sideline reporter and NBA host. But let's don't kid ourselves. The 33-year-old Taylor would not be the host of NBA Countdown, nor would she vote on the league's most prestigious awards if she were short, unattractive, and grumpy. Jason Whitlock, at age 33, 43, or 53, could not get any of the jobs ESPN has handed Taylor. Neither could a long list of highly qualified female sports journalists, and who I will not name. Because mostly, especially in television, has a privilege that trumps virtually all other privileges. Beauty intoxicates TV executives, bloggers, and journalists, and it masks a lack of accomplishment, qualifications, and skill. Beauty transformed Katie Nolan from a bartender to seven-figure personality. Emmy Award winner and the darling of aroused bloggers and TV critics, willing to ignore her pedestrian humor and inability to execute live television. Now, this is where all hell breaks loose, basically. So, Katie Nolan kind of clapped back. You're this close to making an actual point about the expectation of women to not only be good at their job, but also beautiful. But actual points don't pay the bills. Keep the same energy next time I see you, though. Whitlock penned a column. So then he responds, Katie Nolan represents the elimination of America's meritocracy and exposes the fraudulence of her supporters. From that column, Nolan epitomizes everything I find fraudulent about this era of sports journalism, this era of corporate politics. Narrative has eliminated facts and any semblance of a meritocracy. She casts herself a victim when she's most pampered and protected person in sports media. In an industry that values live television, she can't do it. She's not the next Hannah Storm, Linda Cohn, Michelle Beadle, Robin Roberts, Stacey Steele, or Maria Taylor. Nolan is adequate at reading the words of other writers on tape. She's paid more than $1 million for work that would earn virtually every other man or woman $50,000. She's not a journalist. She's not informed, prepared, and knowledgeable like Doris Burke. Nolan is adept at working the grievance system. So that's what's going on. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about this point right here. So I do think, and I do think it's impossible to expect TV executives to not value good looks, being personable on camera, being good on camera, all those things. I think it's impossible to. I think it's a bit of a crutch when people say, like you have the most talented people should get the jobs, and a lot of the times that's just not true, unfortunately, and maybe not even unfortunately, because they are trying to sell a product. I mean, obviously, if we're using Madden ratings and a blogger or whatever, or a radio host, or not a radio host, but like a TV host, if they're a 90 and then another one's a 95, but the 90 is more personal on camera or is more attractive, it's impossible not to expect the TV executives to hire that person. Now, is it fair? Well, TV's not fair. Media is not fair. Like sports media isn't fair. So it's one of those deals where it's just like politics, where should Richard Nixon have lost to JFK because JFK was more attractive and better on TV? I don't know. Like, how can you possibly, in this world, how can you possibly say only the most talented people get the jobs? We know that's not true. How many jobs in business, how many jobs in corporations, how many jobs wherever are given to people because of who they know, because of their connections, because of what, outside forces? This happens in schools. This happens in high school baseball. This happens in Little League baseball. Oh, your dad bought the uniforms? You're going to play. That's not fair. I think that's a weird thing to fall on here, where it's probably the most unfair. Who's getting the jobs on TV? It's a combination of luck and a combination of opportunity. Now, what Katie Nolan is saying is that they shouldn't have to be attractive. They shouldn't have to be funny or personable. Their merit should, or whatever they know, all that stuff, that should get them the job. And there is a little bit of, I see that, right? Like, late night talk show hosts isn't just a bunch of attractive men. I don't think anybody would say James Corden, Jimmy Kimmel, David Letterman, Jay Leno. None of those guys are beating down the list of people sexiest men. But, it's different. For men, I think it's easier or better if men are relatable, whereas for women, they tend to need them to be attractive, right? Is there a problem with that? I can see where Katie Nolan's coming from, but it's one of those deals where, and I can also see where the TV executives are coming from. Let's go to chat. It's a valid question. This would be said about anyone who did what she did. It just happened she was a woman. I honestly can't disagree about Nolan. I've seen her little funny comments with fake laughter in the back. Read off a prompter, like, not funny at all. So I don't know what else she does, though. I've only seen the clips and cringe. I actually like Katie Nolan. I think Katie Nolan's good. I think that what Whitlock is doing here, there's a lot of what he's throwing in here, right? Like the bartender thing. I don't think that's relevant at all. Why does it matter if she was a bartender? We've seen a ton of people in the media, or a ton of comedians, or a ton of movie stars go from being a waiter or a waitress or a bartender or whatever to a superstar. Chris Pratt was working at Bubba Gump's Shrimp Factory when he was discovered. This happens. So I think this is one of those things where Whitlock gets ahead of himself, because now he's basically saying, oh, you were a bartender and you weren't a journalist, or you weren't a reporter, or you weren't whatever. That is to me, it discredits his entire statement. Bartenders, it shouldn't be like, oh, you're a bartender, so you can't be anything else. That should have nothing to do with it. That's actually against what they're both arguing. They're arguing that what you bring to the table should be the only thing that matters in getting you a job. Well, if being a bartender matters, then that kills all that. Then that destroys that whole argument. Is why does your previous employment matter at all of how good you can be on television? Then he talks about that he thinks that the bloggers and TV critics are basically just simps to Katie Nolan. And then at the end here, we're talking about her pedestrian humor. It's incredibly, his opinion. I mean, I don't think Jimmy Fallon is funny, but obviously millions of people think Jimmy Fallon's funny. So just because I think he has pedestrian humor doesn't mean anything. And I think it's also crazy. I think it's also crazy to be like, okay, Katie Nolan was hosting a show where she was given jokes, and to be like, oh, she didn't write the jokes, or oh, she's reading off a teleprompter. How many people in Saturday Night Live who host a Weekend Update, how many people who have hosted the Oscars or the Emmys, how many of them were reading off of a teleprompter and reading jokes that other people wrote? I think it's pretty well understood that late night TV talk show hosts don't write their entire monologue. Like, there are dozens of writers who write those monologues. Award show, same thing. When a guy or a girl hosts the Oscars, they assemble a team of writers, and those writers write the monologues and the jokes or whatever. We never hear about how, oh yeah, Seth MacFarlane was great, but he didn't write all of his jokes. Yeah, well, no shit, he didn't write all of his jokes. You know, like, of course. I mean, Norm Macdonald, my favorite Weekend Update host of all time, he talks about how important it was to have Jim Downey there, and how important it was for him to have those jokes. You know, like, yeah, Norm did a lot of writing, but so did Downey. And you know, that doesn't take away from how good he was. Part of being a good host in that job, whether it's Weekend Update or what Katie Nolan has done, is being able to take those jokes and deliver them. It's not all in the process of writing. I mean, these aren't stand-up comedians. So this is one of those things where it's one of those arguments that is always going to be around. And you hear it all the time with female reporters in the NFL. And it's like, how can they be there if they didn't play the game? How can they be there if they're a woman, if they never experienced college football or pro football? And I think that's unfair as well. But I do think I do think there's a fine line between, they shouldn't have to play the game to understand the game. You know, I never played football. I played 1 year of junior high football. And we just did a 2-hour podcast on football that I think was fine. Like, I don't need to have played 5 years of high school football or college football or NFL football to understand football. Charlie Weiss didn't play football, and he coached at Notre Dame. He coached in the NFL. So it's one of those arguments that I just don't think there's an answer as far as, will we ever not hear it? I don't think that's the case. I think Maria Taylor made a terrible mistake with the Anthony Davis thing, made a whoopsie poopsie. Can't really do that. You know, in that dog-eat-dog world of, hey, there's a million Maria Taylors, or there's a million guys who could take her job, whatever. There's a million people vying to be in that position. Is Maria Taylor the most knowledgeable basketball host/reporter? Probably not. Probably not. But she's in the position. But you could say that about a lot of people. Is Doug Gottlieb one of the 10 most knowledgeable sports media heads in the world? Probably not. But Doug Gottlieb's got his TV show or his radio show. You know, it's impossible to just be like, all right, well, we only are going to employ the best of the best. We're only going to employ the most knowledgeable. We're only going to employ the most experienced. That doesn't happen. That's a pipe dream. You know, that's something that you can talk about and you can throw out there, but it's never reality. It's never reality. Just like, I mean, you can take anybody. You can take any of the announcers, any of the radio hosts, any of the reporters. It's just, they got the opportunity. They were there. Boom. You know, so it's a weird sparring match with Whitlock and Katie Nolan. And the unfortunate thing is that they took a bunch of good points and they just kind of muddied the water with a bunch of like straw man arguments where it doesn't matter if she's a bartender, it doesn't matter if she's attractive, it doesn't matter, like none of that stuff, you know? So that's kind of what I'm into this, is that this gets a lot of noise because people like drama, but it's just empty to me. It's just empty drama. And, you know, I've been in this business, you know, I've been in the media business, and I'm not talking about this video or this podcast or YouTube channels. You know, I was a reporter for a long time. I see how this shit operates. In my college classes, there were people who were put on a pedestal because they were either teachers' pets or, you know, better looking or better speakers or whatever, and maybe they weren't that talented, and, you know, shit happens. I mean, I know somebody from my college class who was very pretty, blonde hair, she was a cheerleader, very pretty. But in my college classes, she was afraid. We're talking about like journalism classes. she was afraid to talk in public. She could not give speeches. In our speech classes, she struggled just talking in front of a class. And she ended up getting a job in Florida as a TV a reporter. And I think she's done pretty well for herself. So it's like, is she the most talented? Probably not. But the combination of whatever it was good enough for the managers, good enough for the executives, good enough for the station managers. She got the opportunity and she did what she did with it. So there's so many different variables that go into why people are in positions, why people get opportunities, how it all happens. So it's one of those deals where it's a lot of noise to be noise, to be honest. But